Hello and welcome to Fireside Palaver, episode 5, not 6, David. This should be episode 6. Hell, this should be episode 7 by now.
True that.
But I messed up. We recorded episode 1 on the drawing of the 3. And you know, it's like fishing stories where like whenever you catch a fish and then you lose it, it's always like the biggest fish you've ever caught.
Fish ever.
Yeah. But I swear, I swear on my life, it was the best Fireside Palaver so far. It was a very good podcast. I was super excited about it. I was trying out new technology and editing the video and just completely deleted it. And it wasn't.
Things happen.
Dude, so that's the thing is like usually when you accidentally lose files on your computer, it's because you were doing something. Like,
Right.
you know, I was expanding the drive and I accidentally
exactly.
corrupted some files, or I was installing Windows on another partition and I got mixed up and overwrote my main partition. You know?
Right.
No, I literally was just like, oh, I don't need these anymore. Delete. Might as well empty that recycle bin. Recycle. And then it was like 2 hours later, I was like, oh my gosh. So there was no like mix up or mishap. It was literally just, I just said, oh, this seems like a good time to just delete this.
Delete everything. Why not? Well, I mean, at least it brought us back for a complete episode for the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were going to get back together the next night. You were very gracious to go ahead and just record the same episode again, but I'm no good at that. I'm no good at like reliving an episode. So, and I didn't want to start
forward.
Yeah, I didn't want to do
bigger, better things, right?
Exactly. What's the saying that Jake says? Go on, there are other worlds than these.
The worlds of these, exactly.
So this will be a full book review. Since we didn't do part 1, there was no point in doing 2 or 3, so we just went ahead and finished the whole thing. And we're going to very spoiler heavy. We're going to talk about every detail of the book. So if you haven't read The Drawing of the 3, go read it and then come back and listen to this. We are going to spoil it, unless you don't care. How do you feel about that? Have we talked about that before? Do you think spoilers are real? Do they really ruin the experience for you?
For me, it does. Like, I'm just the kind of person, though, that, like, I don't like to know something because I like the wow factor, the thrill, or whatever, especially if it's, like, if it's something big like that, makes a difference in how you listen or read or watch or anything. Like, I don't want to know. Like, I want to see if they can get it over on me.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, too. Because I like to think I'm semi-illiterate, like when I read things or watch, and I like to, like, have you ever seen, The Prestige?
Oh yeah.
See, that movie, like, if you knew, like, the spoiler to that would, to me, would ruin the movie the first time I'd seen it.
So,
because the big turn at the end, with, I'm not going to spoil it, but like, it's so good. And you're just like, and the whole time when you go back and watch it again, you're like, oh, they throw it out there that like, this is happening in front of your face the whole time. And you don't see it.
So
same thing with Fight Club. Like if you never saw Fight Club and you knew the spoiler, it would kind of take away from watching it the first time to me.
I actually, so Fight Club, I don't think I knew. I don't think I was spoiled by that. I do remember I watched Fight Club at a pretty impressionable age, and I was like mesmerized by it. It was like one of the first movies that I remember watching like as a teenager and deciding like, oh, this is my favorite movie, Right. It wasn't like a movie that my dad had introduced me to and then I loved. It was like I found this on my own and I love this movie.
Right.
But the Prestige, I actually watched it on a cruise. And I had just did a podcast with Micah. I don't remember Micah's last name, but he's a filmmaker.
Yeah.
You know Micah. And
I know Micah.
We had just did a podcast together, and he was talking about how because he's watched so many Christopher Nolan movies, he can predict the ending based on the beginning, because Christopher Nolan has a habit of always planting a seed in the
Right.
first scenes of the movie. And he just said that to me like days before I went on this cruise, and I watched The Prestige on the cruise. I literally, because he said that and because of the first scenes of the movie, I was like, oh, I get it. And I guessed right. It could watch for the whole movie. Um, I don't think it ruined the movie for me though, and I think that's the thing I was going to say about spoilers is like for me it doesn't usually spoil it for me because I usually like there are cases where it would, but I usually like how are they going to do that? Like I like seeing the mechanics of how they got there in the end. Even
Right.
if I know the ending, I'm just as intrigued by like how are they going to do this to get there, you know?
Right.
But anyway, so drawing the three, we said all that just to say that we're going to spoil the book.
Well, here's the thing too. Like, if once you get to the end of the series,
Yeah.
you'll realize there was all kinds of breadcrumbs that were laid
Oh,
in front of you,
yeah.
like
I
just
believe
just
it.
just crazy stuff. Like,
Yeah.
so
I completely
yeah.
believe it. Yeah, for sure.
Um,
So,
I
how do you
mean,
want to?
yeah, this is a shorter. You know, again, this builds up in size as far as these books. So it's a good book to try to go through in one time. The next couple may be a little bit more difficult to do in one shot, but like, yeah, this
Yeah,
one
we'll probably have to
it's
break those
broken
up.
down. It's broken down very well into sections. So um,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
this one's pretty easy to split up. So you have three doors
three doors.
and essentially three characters for each door, and there's a drawing of the three. Although I was surprised that the drawing of the three didn't necessarily mean that we were going to get
Okay.
I thought the third guy would also come through the door.
So we'll hold off on
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
got
Okay.
that's something I've got down the line, and we'll talk about
Yeah,
that in a little bit. So um,
I get.
first, well, before we jump into it too much, last show I kind of talked about a few things that showed up in this book that tied into his. I thought I could just go ahead and throw all those out that were through because there's not really much more than what I
Yeah,
said
for
the
sure.
first time. But so at the beginning, they talk about when he's flying with Eddie. He's talking about a mythical bird from the land called Garland, called Featherex, which is a book from Eyes of the Dragon. At
Right.
the end of this book, during the pusher part, when Roland is trying to get to, well, it's when he is at the pharmacy getting the Keflex.
Oh, right.
He talks about having seen magicians. He talks
Yeah.
about a guy named Randall Flagg that he saw turn a guy into a dog
Right.
um, for messing with him, and Martin and the Man in Black. And he mentions Flagg and then two boys named Dennis and Thomas that
Right.
are after him. Well, Dennis and Thomas are from Eyes of the Dragon.
Oh,
Their
okay.
Flag is the bad guy, and they're after him after what conspires there.
Okay.
So that's kind of like some stuff that. So it's all like you got to figure their world is like our world. So I mean, there's vast, differences in land.
Right.
They don't have planes, it's horseback and all that stuff in their land. So like, these lands they've heard of, but it's probably like us to California or further.
Right.
So
I was going to
uh
ask you about the magician thing because I thought maybe I knew that that was a reference to something, and I thought maybe it was a reference to something in the Gunslinger that I had forgotten. So that's interesting to know that it's just from another Stephen King book. That's I think that's kind of the confusing thing, as like I'm not a big Stephen King reader, and I've never read any of these Dark Tower books, and so a lot of times it'll reference things, and I'm not sure if this is something I should remember from this story or if this is something that is just a call from some other Stephen King universe story.
right.
So
Well,
it's kind of confusing. If the book's not already, it's a super confusing world in the first
right.
place. So,
Well, if it shows up, I'm going to keep a more keen eye out for
but if you don't mind, let's divide the book up by characters. So
it. Okay.
obviously we should start with Eddie. Um,
Right.
And you also have to forgive me because I feel like we've spoken about some of this stuff because of the deleted episode. All jokes aside,
Well, I'm sure we have,
yeah.
yes.
But the first thing I remember texting you when I first started reading the book was like, wow, this feels way more like what I'm familiar with when it comes to Stephen King
Yes.
than The Gunslinger did. I think if I were actually, I see what you mean. You mentioned to me, I don't know if it was on the show or if it was off the air, but you mentioned to me that a lot of times when people introduce the Dark Tower, they'll tell people just start with book 2.
Right.
I can understand. I think I would. I think I would like to start with book 1. And if I was telling somebody to start the series, I would tell them probably to start with book 1. But just keep in mind that you're gonna churn through that, and then book 2 is like a totally different world.
Right.
And I would probably explain the real world reason why that is. The books were written, in the 80s.
Time apart and stuff. Yeah, and
right.
they the first book plays more into it as you go along. It's not so much as a standout book.
Yeah.
It's kind of a feeds into the book.
I think if I were making this like a show of some kind, I think I would book 2 would be my season 1, and I would take the important parts of book 1 and make those flashbacks.
Flashbacks, yeah, that's what I was.
And then in the second season, you could try to flesh out book 1 again.
Right. Yeah. So one other person that's mentioned is Janelli, who's another mobster with Balazar. He's Janelli Pizza. He's in the van. He's the van guy. He's a lawyer for the mob in the book Thinner. He's the main character, and Janelli's like his main, I guess, client.
Right. Okay.
And so Janelli's in that book a good bit. So that's a cool little, chill. And I know they mention him later, which we'll get into with one of the themes about time and stuff of this book. But
yeah, it kind of feels in a way, it kind of feels like a sci-fi. Like a lot of people.
Oh, definitely.
Like compare it to horror and fantasy is what I heard a lot in watching reviews on the book, but there's definitely a sci-fi element to it because it feels like time travel. He's going through these doors to these other times.
Yes.
And then we, because of the intersection of the characters, he's affecting history even.
Yes.
Through this, so it's totally science fiction in addition to fantasy and horror.
Yes.
But we start out with Eddie,
who is the prisoner.
He's the prisoner.
And of course the symbol is the monkey, which it turns out the monkey on his back is
heroin or cocaine, or let's see, Eddie's addiction is heroin. Yeah,
his addiction is heroin, but he's smuggling cocaine.
That's right.
To get heroin.
Yeah,
for the mob.
Yeah,
to help out his brother.
I had no idea after reading The Gunslinger that's where the next part of the story was going to involve.
Beheading.
Yeah,
right.
A cocaine smuggling in the late 80s. And that.
So basically, like the premise is like there's a door, and he opens a door on a beach of Roland after he's been decimated by these lobster things, and he's dying essentially. But anyway, so it's like when you open the door, it's like a standalone door. There's nothing there. And when you look at the side of the door, it disappears, whatever. But you open it, and it's like looking at what Eddie would later describe as a movie. But of course, Roland doesn't know what a movie is. He just sees moving pictures. But he knows that it's a different place, and it's a different time, and it's different. And he knows he's flying too, which is even crazier. And that's kind of where he steps into the door, and he steps into the mind and body of Eddie Dean.
Now tell me this: if you were like, how do you think this felt for Eddie? Because they make it seem a little too nonchalant. Like another voice starts talking to you inside your own head, and like he thinks it could be drugs at first.
He thinks it could be drug or withdrawals or hallucinations or whatever, yeah.
But pretty quickly he goes along with it. Pretty quickly he's like, okay, well, who are you then? Who are you, buddy? And then
he's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's interesting. One of the things is the differences between how each one of the three perceive Roland when he steps into their minds through the doors. Because, like he steps into Eddie's mind and Eddie doesn't know it right away,
Yeah.
but like, he's able like to see things and know things without Eddie quite knowing. But as soon as he steps into Odetta, it's
Yeah.
like bam right away. And then like the other guy, Jack Mort,
Well,
he had
Roland.
no clue. Like he had no clue at first and then like Roland was just like, get out of the way, I'm just taking over.
Yeah.
And like he could completely control him. And so like it's very interesting how
I think Roland's approach was different for all three
and
doors.
it's yes, like he could care less about Jack Mort
Yeah.
and whatever. So like
But he
yeah,
didn't
but
know that going in. It was
yeah, he
just
didn't know
more
that going in.
because of the factors surrounding the story. There was just more of a sense of urgency when by the time he got to the third door. But in
So
the
like
he needed something from Eddie. So he
Eddie,
needed
and he
something
wasn't
from
sure
yeah.
what it was yet either.
Oh,
And
that's
he was so
true.
like, and like he wasn't. This is the first time he had been into you know that situation where
Yeah.
other than where he's ever lived his entire life. Now he's in somewhere completely different. So I guess he has to get kind of used to it, sitting back. And so he lets Eddie kind of do his thing while kind of Roland watches from the background, which is very interesting. Because you find out that Eddie's got cocaine strapped to him, and he's a pretty chill dude overall. That's why he's doing this because everyone thinks Eddie's even though he's a heroin junkie, he's pretty straightforward and he's got a cool head and he can think. And
Yeah, if anything is
but
his superpower, it's that he's like cool under pressure basically.
right. And you're thinking about this. So Roland goes into him, and when he goes into him, one of the interesting things that happens when he takes over for an Eddie or whoever is Roland's eyes come out in that person. So Eddie
Yeah.
had, I think they said hazel eyes, and then like the stewardess looks, he's got blue eyes, and then like later he's back to hazel eyes, and it kind of trips something off. So it makes you wonder if he would have actually got away with all this, because until then they had no clue, and it's the eyes that tipped him off. So if Roland would have never come through, Eddie probably would have got through with no problems.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it was all Roland's fault, and then Roland has to save him. But yeah, so um,
That's
you know,
true. Roland was the problem and the solution here.
exactly. So,
Yeah, that's
but so
true.
that just kind of it sets off a fight or flight kind of thing where Roland finally has to come out and say, "Hey, listen, maggot, stay cool, don't talk," kind of thing. And I mean, like Eddie does, like I think he says, a few things out loud at first, and then he quiets down. And I think the whole time he thinks it's mostly a dream hallucination thing, so he kind of plays along with it. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's why kind of the vibe I got.
with that section of the book, I think we do have a little more introspective commentary from Eddie than we did from the other two.
Right,
Um, and he does kind of like have moments where he's like, "Oh yeah, that wasn't real, right?" Like
right,
he has moments where he's like beside himself and not really sure if that was real or not. But then whenever Roland speaks, he like remembers that, "Oh yeah, it is real." And so yeah, I think he's kind of surreal. I think that's
right,
exactly what the term means. He's kind of surreal with the whole thing, where he's just doesn't know how to take it and plays along. Um, but that eventually culminates to Balazar, and
He's the big bad mobster guy that has his brother hostage and everything.
yeah, and he has his own tower. So they actually do go to the tower. I thought that was funny. It came up a few times during Eddie's
Well,
things.
there'll be a lot of that. Like if you keep, there'll be like tower this or tower that keeps coming up all through here. Like
Yeah,
it's
the pizza
yeah.
place had a leaning
Well,
tower,
yes,
and then there was the actual card tower on Balazar's desk.
and then so they Roland and Eddie had basically hidden the cocaine in Roland's world to get out of the airport. Now they got to go see this Balazar guy to because he does, he's like, there's no way that you got held and
Yeah.
You're not either flipped on me or there's something going on. We got to figure this out. Which again, that was a thing that I thought was weird. That like they make it a point that Eddie's being tailed by all these people, and then the mob is also telling him, and then they get to his apartment, and then Eddie, like after some back and forth, he winds up getting in the van and leaving with Jack Andolini. And it's like, but the feds are still, like, the tail is still there. Why didn't they tell? Like, they had to been watching that. And that part kind of, I still don't know
Yeah.
just kind of, it's kind of weird that, because when all the stuff occurs, like with the battle and everything with Balazar, you'd think that they had tailed them to this place, so they'd be right there, even if they were just sitting outside waiting. But I don't know. Just writers
Yeah, and
perspective or whatever. We'll just.
I think that they probably always it's probably not just Eddie. They probably are watching Balazar all the time,
Right.
and they just don't have the right reason yet to to confront him. But yeah, it is a little odd the way that part of the story plays out.
But they go there, and then of course Eddie's like, "I got your cocaine. Where's my brother?" And he's like, they make him get naked. And I think
Yeah.
we talked about the ease of body cavity searches last time in the
Yeah.
deleted episode, which still is. There's several sections in here where there's fists up inside.
Yeah, poor
And it
Eddie.
seems
Poor
like
Eddie.
a very, very easy and simple thing, and I'm like, that
He has
can't
a
be.
really funny saying about it too. I can't remember, but in the Eddie voice, he says something like, "Oh yeah, sure, they're gonna search your assholes to eyebrows or something like that." Like he has some really great term for it.
One of Eddie has some of the greatest, like, that's
Yeah,
why I love that character. Like
yeah,
he's
yeah.
fantastic.
He's a lot of fun. I could tell.
Yes.
I could tell that's a fun character for Stephen King to write.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so like they wind up bringing Jack and Leany into the mid world, and the lobsters come and tear him up, and Eddie and Roland come out getting ready to, for some reason, still try and do a drug trade. I don't know, but
Yeah,
Eddie hears that his brother's dead, and so it sets him off, and then you have the great naked gun battle.
yeah. I kept forgetting he was naked, and then like he has clothes on for the rest of the book, but they never really say where they came from.
Where they got the clothes?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you could imagine he's just naked for the rest of the book, but he puts the gun in his waistband, so he
Well,
has
I'm
at least pants
assuming.
on.
Well, I guess after the gun battle, he puts his clothes back on because he takes his clothes off
Yeah,
there
before he goes back through.
outside there.
But the police were like trying to come in. He had to leave in a
Yeah, I know,
hurry.
right? He's
Yeah.
just like, grab it, come on. But so there's the other thing we were talking about, like with the tail and stuff. Like you've always got these like writers. I don't know, good. I say prerogative, but like something that just very convenient. So it's very convenient that
The police didn't come
in
in sooner.
well in Balazar's hidden compartment in his bathroom, he just happens to have Keflex
Yeah, right. Yeah.
that Roland needs to survive. So
Yeah.
like, I don't know why that's something that a gangster would keep in his hidden compartment. And he explains it away because of junkies, but then it's like, I don't know, whatever. But they
Yeah.
find this stuff. They're able to get back through the door.
It,
Roland takes the stuff and starts getting better.
whenever Roland, so why did Roland even help him do any of this? Like, I get why he helped him at first because he needed medicine because he was poisoned by the lobstrosities. Which you have to forgive us. We talked about all this and we're re-talking about it now, so we've forgotten to
Right.
mention the lobstrosities and all that. But so like he needs medicine. That's why he's helping him to
He needs
begin with.
medicine, but he needs Eddie more than
And he needs
anything.
Eddie, but he could just take Eddie. Like because
Right. But he knows, I think he knows, again, like he knows the different ways he approached the way he interacted with each one. I think he knew that he had to make Eddie. I think he even says it in there. Eddie had to make the decision to come. He couldn't force Eddie. He knew he couldn't force Eddie. And have him be like all in, I guess. So Eddie made that conscious decision to come with him. And
yeah, I agree with
the
that's
whole
interesting. How did he know that? That's interesting.
Ka
The Ka.
Ka is the answer to everything. So
Because,
like Ka, you'll hear come up a lot, which is like he explains it a couple different ways: destiny,
yeah,
like will, like just anything that can't be explained is explained by Ka. And so he Roland goes with Ka. Like if he doesn't know anything else, he's just like let Ka will. Like you'll hear there's a I love a lot of the sayings that get started with like in Roland's world and things like if there's water, I forgot it's like if there's water, God wills it or something like that. There's like all these like little terms
yeah.
and
I remember
come
in the
up that all kind of focus on the same thing. Like
yeah, I
you
remember in
know,
the first book there was like long life, and there was
long
like
days
a
and pleasant nights and
yeah. But yeah, so the shootout scene again, we talked about it before, but we got to re-talk about it because I deleted the episode. But the amazing shootout scene at the end of Eddie's story, and the way everybody in that scene, like all of the little side characters that just seem like completely, just they seem completely unimportant, like all had this like build up and were like these like well fleshed out, just little momentary characters that
right.
like felt so real. I mean, it was like The Sopranos
I know, right? It is.
in the Stephen King universe. Like all of a sudden, like we're going from the Gunslinger to the Sopranos, like all in like 170 pages,
Right.
and it
Blow them away.
it just you just I don't know how to just like that's why Stephen King is great. Like this is
Well,
what
I
everybody loves
love
him
this.
for.
Well, you know the part in the shootout where the guy like has Eddie dead to rights, and then the dude behind him is getting all like excited because he's got a machine gun. He's
Yeah,
like, "Get
yeah,
right!" And he just starts shooting. He winds up killing the guy that has Eddie because like, and everyone's yelling. Even Balazar's like, "Stop shooting, you stupid son of a bitch!" Like. And the
yeah,
guy's just, you can just imagine this guy, just like this
yeah,
Italian guy in a tracksuit with a fully automatic machine gun just spraying the room. And that's great. Like, yeah, I love that imagery that he writes with. And yeah, and then like they just blow him away.
yeah. And then, oh yeah, another thing we mentioned in the deleted episode, but there's no reason for them to have even they they still bring Balazar his cocaine. They still
Yeah, like
delivered the
so he's like,
cocaine for like
yeah,
no
he's like
reason.
bring 1 pound and leave the other pound, whatever. And you're like, why? Because you just killed Jack Andolini, so he's not coming back. So like they're gonna.
Now, when we talked about this is kind of interesting because when we talked about this before, I had not read the rest of the book. Was that Eddie's idea, or was that was that Roland's idea? I got to quit saying the
About
gunslinger because Eddie's a gunslinger now.
Right. So
Um,
I think it was. I think it was. I think the plan was originally that Eddie was going to go into that bathroom by himself. He was going to step through the door. He was going to bring half of the cocaine, come out and say, "Hey, here's half. Let my brother go." Like
go
he
back
said, and then
in.
he would make a phone call once he knew his brother was safe. Then he would go back in and get the other half.
Yeah,
So then when Jack Andolini goes into the bathroom, they wind up having to kill him. That plan's dead. Like there's no plan anymore. But then they're still like, grab the other half of the cocaine. I'm like, well, what do you need it for? Like, you're only gonna fake them for so long because I don't
yeah,
know. But then and then the other thing, if they did bring half, what happened to the other half? It's still in Roland's world, and they never really mentioned that either. So the cocaine just disappeared
hmm.
somewhere along the way.
I was curious for a particular reason, but we'll get into it. We'll get into it later. So we move on from Eddie, which I hate that I deleted that episode because he definitely deserved his own episode because Eddie is
So
now my
good.
favorite character in the series, although
Yeah.
Susanna is also awesome. Um,
So
but
you get Eddie and Roland because now you got Eddie coming down from heroin addiction, and you
yeah,
got Roland who's trying to get better from
the
just
poison.
poisoning.
Yeah,
Um, and so Eddie's having to feed him and take care of him, and also take care of himself.
yeah,
Found out Eddie like contemplated suicide a couple times.
Yeah, and
It's
he had a
just been pretty
really
much hell.
he had a clever reason for not doing it, and I can't remember now
He
what
didn't
it.
want to shit his pants.
Yeah, he has.
If the barrel if it didn't shoot, he didn't want
Oh,
to
that's
shit
right.
his pants and have to go wash him in the water.
He didn't want to. Yeah, if he survived, he didn't want
If he
to.
survived.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that. Um, and so then the next door they introduce is Detta Odetta, and
Who was
um,
the Lady of Shadows.
the Lady of Shadows. Detta Odetta. After reading the entire book, I love the final character. Eventually, Detta
Right.
Odetta becomes Susanna. Um,
Susanna.
but that section of the book was super hard to
Wild.
read. Yeah,
It's wild.
there's some really uncomfortable stuff in that
Oh
section of
yeah.
the book.
I told
That
you there would be like
yeah,
so like here's the main thing I put under Lady of Shadows is there's two themes. One is caricature. I think that's the biggest thing.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought that
she
up.
is a 100% Southern black woman caricature to every. It's like a 100 defense points all the way defense. Like
Yeah, you broke up
I
for a
guess you would
second.
call pop culture at the time
Mm-hmm.
um, of what people thought an ignorant black woman would be, and she plays it to you know
Yeah.
even way overboard. And
Oh
they even because even Eddie and Roland not even knowing any better, Roland knows. He's like,
yeah. He's like this.
yeah, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
this there's something off. And Eddie's like, yeah, this isn't how people were
Yeah.
when I was. Because again, another theme here in that you get into this is time and date. So like this takes place years before Eddie like Eddie may have been a kid at this time. I'm trying to remember. I know they go through all this, but like so Eddie is from the early 80s
And
and
Odetta was from the
this
60s.
is late
I
60s
think so. Yeah.
because it's in the Jim Crow era
Yeah.
and
And
she talks about
you said a caricature of like an ignorant black southern lady.
yes.
Not just a caricature. This is like a caricature that like a racist person would
Yeah,
think.
exactly. A
Yeah.
racist person would think. Like
Like
a
it's
white person's like
right, yeah. Like someone that was like racist and scared of southern black women would think
yes.
that they act this way. And
Yes.
it's almost like Detta was like the thing that Eddie points out is that like this is an act. She definitely doesn't believe this, and so it's almost like Detta was like a defense mechanism. Is like, well, I'm gonna be that thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like she was like trying so hard to like be that caricature, and then Odetta is like the complete
The
opposite of that.
opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
she's
absolute opposite.
southern sweet charm, like
Yeah,
very soft spoken, very intelligent,
but also
um,
I don't know. So
meek, very meek.
very meek, yeah, is the right word. Is the right word. I don't want to say she doesn't take up for herself though, because at the beginning of the Odetta chapter, where she's talking about where she goes to was it Mississippi, Alabama? She goes somewhere in the South and she gets arrested, and they make her sit in the prison
Yes.
cell until she
Pees
pees
herself,
herself. Yeah,
told
and they're trying to embarrass her.
Right.
She doesn't really defend herself in that moment, but there wasn't really anything she could do. But she did
Right.
recognize that it was like terrible, and she blew up to her driver about it,
Yes.
and talked about like how like backwards and gross it all was. So
And there's a part in there that is worth mentioning too, when she's talking to her driver, and
yeah,
it's a theme that Stephen King carries over in multiple books, but it's JFK.
yeah,
He's a big
yeah.
JFK guy because she mentions that the driver says he's the last
The
gunslinger,
Last Gunslinger. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and so there's that whole thing, and it actually comes up more later. But yeah, I mean, it's
So the racism stuff obviously made me uncomfortable, but also there's a scene where like she's like a sexually aroused kleptomaniac,
right.
and I'm sure they probably did say how old she was, but she's pretty young in that scene.
She's, I think, in the time of the drawing, I don't think they ever.
I don't know if they said or not.
She's older than Eddie, so I'm guessing mid-30s at that point.
Yeah, but she's remembering stealing
But
that
she's
plate.
remembering back then, so I'm guessing she was probably a teenager.
Yeah.
Like young teen, like when Roland goes through. So first of all, Eddie wants to go through with him because he says he wants some fried chicken and a Coke or whatever. And Roland's like, you want to hook up, get heroin, whatever. So they have this argument, and Eddie's like, well, if you go through, I'm going to kill you.
Oh
And so it's
yeah.
kind of like the Mexican standoff thing where like, but Roland's just like, Roland is Roland. He's like, you're going to do what Ka says, and just basically walks through. And essentially it's Detta. Well, originally it's Odetta in Macy's, and then Odetta takes over, and she decides she's going to steal all this crappy jewelry, and they realize that the jig's up because Roland and them see that whoever notices. So Roland jumps in to kind of take over, and he immediately, number one, she immediately reacts and knows something just happened and fights back, and then he has to struggle to fight with her to get control, and they wind up. He wheels away from the security. They bust into the changing room, and he throws her through the door back into his world, and then of course they're gone, which makes me always think like the two security guards that like busted in there, and then she's just going like, how do you report that? Like, yeah, I mean, like, this lady, she's in a wheelchair, she rolled in here, she's gone.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I mean, like, what?
I didn't think about that.
But yeah, so he basically brings her without permission, without. I mean, he has to react because she's going to get arrested or something's going to happen. Again, and he realizes
it makes
this
sense.
is the only opportunity.
It makes sense that Detta, in both times that Detta takes over, it makes sense that Detta is Odetta's defense mechanism because whenever Roland steps into her mind, Detta reacts to it. Now, there's some evidence that Detta had already been in control because Odetta only remembers getting back to her apartment. Yeah, she doesn't remember leaving her apartment. She doesn't
remember leaving or doing any other
And then
stuff.
the other time that Detta takes over in the book is after she's through the door, and she's talking to Eddie, and Eddie basically says like, "Hey, give this a chance. Like, consider that this could be real." And instead of doing that, Detta takes over.
So there's one part that comes up that's important right here. So when Roland pulls them through and Eddie looks through too, he sees two separate people. Roland sees two separate people, and then Odetta and Detta see each other, which becomes very important later. Which you don't know about that yet, but and it starts. Roland starts a little something in his mind where he's thinking about this, where they saw each other, and now because before they made it a point that they're pretty sure they don't know anything about each other. They may have suspected it at one point in some way, shape, or form, but they don't have any really clue. Well, he says Odetta more than Detta. He said Detta may have a clue, but Odetta has no clue. And so, but them seeing each other in that split second coming through the door, it becomes like a very important thing for later.
One thing we should talk about too while we're talking about this whole thing is, so in the book they call it schizophrenic, and some would call it multiple personality disorder, but it's a very Hollywood style telling of that story. Like, I don't think in real life it really works to this like degree.
No, I don't think so either.
But it works in Stephen King universe because it could be some other dark
writer
force.
Convenience. I mean, same thing. Like it's.
But yeah, I kind of went with it, and at the time period that this book was written, it was not as played out in the media as it is now. Like now, it's kind of eye
Right.
rolly when this kind of thing happens.
Right.
But at this time period, it was not. This was
Right.
not as common. Um,
And she, you know, his play on it's a little bit different than your typical ones. Like,
yeah,
it's not like what is it? Oh God, the
the
famous one where she's got like 20 different personalities. So
yeah,
it's just it's condensed to these two, and like they play off each other pretty well. And so you've got Odetta who, when she comes out, she's like, "Oh, this isn't real. I'm in a coma." Like,
yeah,
I'm in a hospital bed because this happened to me when I was a child. I got hit
yeah,
by a brick in the head. I was in a coma, had very vivid dreams. This is obviously one of those things. And then like Eddie challengers her on a couple of different things because if this is her coma dream, then he's not real. And like so he calls her on a few things, and that's a pretty good thing. And you can tell that Eddie's starting to fall in love with Odetta. Um,
that's
he,
a really. I thought that was a really cool aspect of the story too. That like I'm like rooting for Eddie and Odetta, but
right,
every time Detta shows up, I can't stand that character.
right.
Like,
And then like, well, it's they play that up with Roland knows that he doesn't have Henry anymore, and Henry was the person that he had in the world to take care of, and now he's got Odetta, and
oh right,
Odetta is not only someone he can take care of, but unlike Henry, she's someone that he deems worthy to take care of. But there's just this other inconvenient part that he
mm-hmm.
doesn't want to see. And, again, they make that very relevant with like his lackadaisical attitude around Odetta, not and whereas Roland's always on alert for looking for Detta because he knows like she's a snake. I mean,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
And he knows that now that Eddie's blind to anything,
He could let his guard down.
he can let his guard down and whatever. So he's got to be very careful. And they had gotten all the medicine, and Roland had gotten pretty good to a point, but like any we know modern medicine, you got to keep going. And he just didn't have
Mm-hmm.
enough to keep going. So now he's kind of falling back, and Eddie's having to take care of Roland, and especially when it's Detta, because she makes like you know traveling up the beach, she tries to fall down on purpose, and she tries to slow them down on
Yeah,
purpose, and she won't eat because she thinks they're trying to poison her and kill her, and they're trying to rape her all the time, and the gray
yeah.
meat and all
That's
this stuff, and
another.
like
That's another interesting thing is that like she like is creating her own like memories that like never happened.
it
She's
never
creating her
happened.
own.
So like yeah, when she's not there, she's making up memories of them doing all this stuff to her. And
Yeah.
so she won't eat. And then but when Detta comes out, she won't eat because she thinks she's just having allergic reactions to it.
Well, she
And then
thinks
Eddie has to talk her into it.
Odetta comes back and she can tell she hasn't eaten. And so she says,
Eating.
well, if I haven't eaten, then I must have tried and gotten sick. And then so she
Right.
creates memories of that
Of
never
her
happened.
own thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's
Yeah.
a never ending thing. Like
Huh.
there's time and everything that or you're skipping. But anyway, so he winds up. The plan is Eddie's going to take her to the next door, leave her there, come back with a wheelchair, get Roland, take Roland back, and then Roland will go into the next door, get the next person, hopefully get medicine, get all fixed up, and everyone will be all hunky dory. He gives uh, Eddie the gun. It's like don't give her the gun. Just
I just
leave
thought
her
about
there.
I just thought about something. Around this time in the story they start hearing the cat in the woods.
The cat, yes.
Did that ever come out? I don't
No, you
remember.
never saw anything from the cat. I
I
don't think.
just thought about that. We never saw
Just
it.
that it was in the area, and I think it was just a thing for to put Eddie on his guard
Yeah.
because he was,
I
less
just
willing.
I just never. It just hit me that never. It never actually played out though. We just heard it, and
Right.
it was a
Here.
threat. It was a threat
Yes.
to give Eddie a reason to be wary of leaving Odetta there by herself.
No.
Yeah.
Um,
One
And so
thing
you can tell what's that?
in this part of the book, I noticed that like it takes him like a few days to take Odetta to the next door, but then he like runs all the way back
Runs
to
back in like a
Roland.
day or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
then it
noticed
takes
that
them like
too.
2 days to get back.
Yeah,
So that was a little
he must have
odd,
been
but
hoofing it.
yeah, yeah, really.
Um, Again, like it, time's crazy. So yeah, so he winds up going back. They finally get to the door. They decide that he can't leave the gun. They wind up making love with each other.
Hmm.
All this stuff. They look at the stars, and then he finally decides that he's gonna have to leave. And then you hear the cat thing again. And she's just like, don't, just whatever. And he's like, no, you got to take the gun. He gives her the gun, leaves her, goes back, finds Roland. Roland's like, you got to sleep for a little while. And by the way, I knew you were gonna leave him the gun, and you're an idiot. And
Yeah.
and like whatever. So like Roland is heavier, so it takes them longer. It takes them like a couple days. They wind up getting back. Of course, she's gone. Doors there, and then then that brings you to the next door, which is the pusher.
Yeah.
Which did you have any? What was your idea? Did you have any idea what the pusher might be?
Yeah, I did. I thought I based on the name, I knew that it was going to be some sort of serial pusher. Like I thought, my imagination.
Did you think of the pusher, the person that pushed Odetta?
No, I didn't think about that, and
Okay,
I didn't think about the person that pushed Jack. I just thought, oh, it's going to turn out that he like is like pushing people off of buildings and making it look like suicide or something like
okay.
that. My
Well, I
mind
mean,
went
kind of
straight to
was
that.
too, but
Yeah, I was pretty close, but like, yeah, I had no idea that it was going to have any connection to Jake or Jake.
or Odetta,
Yeah, I think I said Jack earlier. Um, I had no idea it was gonna have any connection to anything. I just thought, oh, it's probably somebody that's like a serial pusher.
right? Well, that's pretty
Which,
good though,
yeah,
even just to pull that out,
the only reason why I guessed that is because it's creepy enough that I think Stephen King would write about it,
right?
and it made sense for the name. But it's really creepy. Like I thought, oh crap, they're gonna have to bring this guy through the door, and I would rather Odetta turn into Detta than them have to
Right,
go on the journey with this guy. Like he's way more. It's way scarier to think like because they first start talking about how he's been following this kid, and I was like, oh great, he's like a kid
right,
killer, like
and
like
it kind of is.
yeah, yeah, totally. So I thought they were gonna have to make this a redeeming character, and I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad they pushed him in front of a train. Um,
Yes. So essentially, like Roland is like, I got to go through the door, and he wants Eddie to go with him, and Eddie's like, nah, bro. He's like, I know what you're trying to do. Um, he's like, I got to find Odetta. And so anyway, he goes in there, and that's where he goes into this Jack Mort, Jack
mm-hmm.
Death. Come on
Yep.
now, Mort.
Oh yeah.
He, again, he makes it plain that Morton has no idea that he just entered his mind. He again, Roland describes him like Odetta and Detta. He's got two personalities. He's got this businessman out exterior, but he's got
Mm-hmm.
this cold-blooded psychopathic killer guy interior that like is like two different people living two different lives essentially.
Yeah.
Even though they know about each other, they're one and the same, but they're different.
Yeah.
Um, and that's pretty interesting because you like again you get all this duality stuff and like
Yeah.
uh, there's a lot of that theme that plays through this book. Um, the good versus like Eddie, the junkie like that can't defend himself versus the Eddie that comes out now. Detta, just
I didn't think about
Jack Mort and like his ulterior personality, all that stuff. Like
yeah.
it's all like a two comes in twos kind of theme.
I didn't think about the comparison between Eddie and Mort, and how like society would look at Eddie being a junkie as being the bad guy and Mort as being the good guy because he's a successful business person.
Right, exactly.
And it turns out that it's the complete opposite. Eddie seems like he's a good spirited guy,
Right.
who got into a bad thing, whereas Mort, like, he gives this impression of being a guy that's surrounded by prosperity and good, and he's overcome by this urge to do evil.
Just
Um,
kill. And
yeah,
it's been going on for a long time. Up
yeah.
at the point where you're introduced
Oh,
to him, he's been
I
doing this
mean,
for quite a
essentially
while.
Odeta's whole life, right? Because he
Yes.
dropped a
So you
brick on
find that
her.
out.
Yeah,
You find out he's the one that dropped the brick on her when she was a child.
yeah,
Um, and it goes through all that. But what happens is when Roland enters, he realizes he's in the sky, and he's like on a city street, and he realizes that he's following Jake, and he realizes also that this is the point where, because if you go back to the gunslinger, Jake is killed by getting hit by a car, and he wakes up in Roland's world. So Roland now in Jack Mort's mind is that Jack Mort, but first he at first Roland thinks he wakes up in the Man in Black because he
because
knows that it's Jake that he's following, and he believes that the Man in Black is who pushed Jake in front of the car.
did Jake believe that, or did
Yes,
Roland in the first book?
that
He
they
did.
both believed that it was the Man in Black.
Hmm.
And no, this comes up again later and stuff, so there's more to it. But he realizes it's this guy, it's Jack Mort, and he realizes that this is when it happens that Jack is getting ready to push Jake in front of the car, and so Roland steps in and distracts Jack for just enough time to where that doesn't happen, and Jack's like pissed off, and like he makes a big deal out of him like going all through traffic and stuff, and Jake just leaves. Now he says that he talks about again in a little bit, like what effect that has now,
Yeah, yeah.
because in essence, he even says that he's made a what you call it, um,
Paradox.
paradox, because now Jake didn't die, so therefore he couldn't have met Jake at the way station like he did, and therefore that other stuff that happened that didn't happen afterwards. But he was like, I don't have time to ponder on that right now. I got to do this other stuff.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that? I'm interested to hear your take on this.
So because I know, and maybe this is a little bit unfair because I know a little bit about the book even before reading it, but because I know that this takes place with multiple universes, so there's different aspects of time travel, right? You got Lost style time travel where it's like if you go to the past and change something, you that always there's no version of history where that did not happen. Like there's only one timeline. It just coincidentally, you never knew that you went back in time and changed that thing, but you did. There's no version of
Right,
history where you couldn't have.
right,
Um, or there is the version of time travel where it's like because you changed that, you've now made a new universe where a
right.
new set of events happen. That one that you came from, that all happened, but now there's a new one. There's a new timeline. And so that's kind of the two and I'm sure there's a lot more that people can come up with, but that's the two main
That's the
literary.
two main. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree. Yeah.
And so I kind of thought, well, now in this timeline, he has saved him, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the timeline that doesn't necessarily mean that he saved him in every timeline. You know what I mean? And so the events of the book
Yeah,
could have still happened with no paradox.
I'll say like this. I'm next book. I'm very interested. I can't wait till you get into
Yeah.
because this like I always bring up Lost and all that because I know like
Yeah.
this stuff is very interesting, and the way you'll like the way he does this, like the paradoxical thing and the time travel
Yeah.
and the changing of timelines. You'll find his take on it very, very good. Um,
The thing I
and it's
like,
very close to what we're talking about, but
yeah.
there's a little variation which is really cool, and it winds up it's a the way he does this becomes kind of a common way he does a few things throughout the books, and it's very interesting. Like,
well, it's like in 11/22/63. Every time the guy goes back in time, he doesn't make a new timeline. He has to
right,
do it all again.
he has to do it all again to make it
Um,
come out like he wants.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I prefer that type of time travel over
right.
the other because like the way it's
It can
done.
get confusing.
Yeah, like the way Star Trek actually does both. So the problem with Star Trek, and it's because it's different writers over different eras
Right.
of, but Star Trek has had episodes where they have to complete whatever it was because there's no other version of history where they didn't do that. And then they've had episodes where because they went back, like there's the episode where Cisco goes back in time, and then whenever he gets back to his time, he looks in a history book and he sees that his picture's in there. But the truth is whenever he was in university at the Federation, like like he would have seen that that's me in this book. What the
Right.
hell?
Exactly.
But so like they've done both
Oh,
paradoxes.
sure.
But I forgot where I was going with that from this. But I prefer it. That's what I was gonna say. I prefer it whenever a writer is good enough to make it so that these events always happened, because to me that's just knowing, as I'm not a writer, but as like knowing that this was constructed by a human being and he had to think of all this ahead of time. I much prefer the idea that like whenever Damon Lindelof was planning the first episode of Lost, he knew that there were certain things that needed to happen in order to make
Oh,
sense at
sure.
the
Yeah.
end. You know what I mean? And I don't think he did that, by the way. I think they figured out a way to make it work.
I think they figured out a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and even based on Stephen King's letter at the end of this book, that must be what he kind of did.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, but that's a great craft to be able to
He's
do that.
he's got a if you're ever interested just in reading a really good book that is just it's a nonfiction book. It's by Stephen King. It's called On Writing. It's just
I've
basically
heard about
about
that.
how he does his craft.
Yeah, that
And
would be
like
really interesting.
he essentially says that he does not plan out
Yeah,
like he doesn't know how the book is going to end a lot of times. It flows and it comes to him and it tells him, he doesn't tell it.
yeah, yeah.
Um and so there's a lot, all these books, there's a lot of that in there, but there's also like there's things that happen in his life that influence a lot of this.
I
So
could
like
I could see the way this book is written. It feels like he just went through, like he just got in a trance one day and like wrote all of Eddie's story,
right,
and then went back and edited it later, and then a week later he got on a tear and he wrote all of Odetta's stuff, and then all
right.
of Odetta's stuff, and I get it does feel that way, and I can totally see Stephen King, like the other things I've read by him also feel that way. He just seems like he kind of goes on like long tangents of like
High on cocaine and drinking a lot and just
yeah. I
fucking
was gonna ask if
putting
he
down
has.
words. Oh yeah, he had a major
Okay.
substance abuse issue. So like that's what I was gonna say. One of the things that happens in these books is you get the first three books, and then is that right? I can't remember. It's either the first three or first four. I'd have to. And then I don't know if you remember when he got hit by the van when he was
Yeah,
walking and about killed him.
I do remember
So
that. Yeah.
that threw a I don't know, like a at first he said he was going to quit writing, and then like he went through a lot of rehabilitation, then he got hooked on opioids from the painkillers and all that stuff, and then once he got cleaned up, one of the first things he wanted to do was get back to Dark Tower, and that's when he just started churning those huge volumes at the end. Was all because like it was,
That's
I don't know,
interesting.
that wreck affected all that. Like I guess he was desperate to get the story out. I don't know, because he came out with like two of the bigger volumes, I think, in back-to-back years.
Hmm.
I believe. So yeah, I mean, it's all that stuff affected him, and again, even now, it goes back to common themes for this whole series: time,
Mm-hmm.
space, and like era. So like one of the things we were talking about, I think you asked me one time, I guess after we recorded that last episode, that got deleted was you liked Balazar. You're like, man, he's a good character. It'd be cool, but whatever. Well, I
Yeah.
don't know if you paid attention at the end
Yeah. Yeah.
when the two cops were like wanting to bust that guy. They were like, maybe we could bust this guy to get to this guy, and we could bust this guy, and maybe we could get to that Balazar dude. And you're
Yeah.
like, aha. So it depends. Again, this is all depending on where you are,
Yeah.
at what time of frame you are, who is alive and who's dead, and what's happened and what hasn't happened. So,
Yeah.
like, where he is now, all the stuff with Eddie hasn't happened yet. So Balazar and all them are still,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, going. So
One thing I thought
that
about
stuff's really cool.
one thing I thought about in this scene that started this discussion about the time is the gunslinger in that moment when he thinks it could be, if he sees the man in black, he's like, I'll consider the damnation of the paradox later. Like if it's on sight, like if I see him, I'm killing him. We'll figure out whatever, if the universe folds in on itself because
Right.
I've broken time by doing so. We'll figure that out later.
So be
First
it.
thing,
Yes.
yeah. First thing first, I'm killing this guy. But yeah, this whole story goes by really quick because at the same time that it's happening, you have the events on the beach with Deda's confrontation with Eddie,
Eddie.
and
Because he eventually, like, he keeps yelling, and then eventually she knows.
yeah,
Of course, what really happened, that it was Data, not whatever thing that Eddie was coming with. So, like, she waits until he falls asleep and then comes down there and easily
yeah,
takes the gun and ties him up and takes him hostage. And her original plan is just to kill Eddie
yeah.
and then
The,
Roland, and wait till Roland comes through, and then make him take her back through, or kill whatever she needs to do.
what I liked about this moment was, sure, it's diabolical, but it also gave you some hope for Deda, because I kept thinking, like, man, she's thinking all this stuff way ahead. like like
Yes.
she's showing signs that she's way more intelligent
She's very
than she's putting
intelligent.
on. Yeah.
Right.
And so it gave me hope that, like, Odetta could shine through, because, like, if she's smart enough to think all this through, then she can reason,
Right.
through the other struggles,
Well,
if
she
Eddie can help
realizes
her.
that there's something she realizes without knowing exactly, but she realizes that she can't kill, especially Roland. She
Yeah.
can't kill Roland's body because she knows if she does, that door is probably going away. She's not sure about Eddie, but then she comes to the conclusion that, hey, what's to keep him from coming back if he knows that Eddie's dead? And then she thinks maybe she'll just, like, brain Eddie and pretend, but then she's like, that's not going to work either. And that's when Odetta's voice, if you notice, comes through a couple times in that little part
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, it's a softer, because she
Yeah.
says Detta looks at Eddie and sees like a little baby or whatever laying there or something, and then, like, she's like, don't hurt him, because then, it's that small voice inside her head that she doesn't realize is Odetta. And so she just ties him up, and her plan is to drag him down to the monstrosities and
Yeah.
force Roland to come out, and then she can do what she needs to do. But Roland is refusing to look behind him to see what's going on. He knows something's going on because he saw the shadows and stuff, like, early on, but since then he was like, no, he can't let what's going on back there affect what he's doing. Um,
Yeah.
and so his neck, and then there's a scene where, like, the last time you had seen Jack was at the office, and then Detta looks in the door for a split second, and she sees that they're holding up a convenience store or something, and she's not sure what it is, but he knows he's got a gun and he's pointing at somebody.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then it just goes off to, like, she looks away, so then you're like, well, what the hell just happened? Like,
Yeah.
um,
It's
and so then,
foreshadowing the next scene. Yeah.
right. So yeah, basically she ties up Eddie, and then she decides to play the waiting game, and then it kind of cuts back to Roland, and you find out that he does this cool thing with the wallet, trying to get bullets.
Yeah.
At a place, but he doesn't have the correct stuff to get him, whatever.
So one thing I noticed about the scenes you just mentioned and how you could interpret it as some scenes were in Odetta's voice versus Detta's. But I also we pointed it out in the episode that we deleted, but the beginning of the book before Roland meets Eddie, everything is written as if it's only from Roland's perspective on the world.
Right.
So like you can't describe something as being the size of a matchbook. Well, you might could.
Right.
He's probably seen a matchbook, but you couldn't say, "Oh, it was about the size of an iPad," because Roland's not going to know what an iPad is. Well, neither would Eddie. But
Right.
anyway, that's a bad example.
But yeah, I get you.
Yeah, they would. It was written as if, and then once Eddie's introduced, even in the sections where they're talking about Roland, they start. There's more comprehensive stuff that would be from Eddie's
Right.
time period, and then it seems like they do the same thing. But another thing that really stood out to me, and I think probably to most people because it was really out front, they gave quite a few examples of it during the third door, is Roland. I feel like his character alignment has shifted over the course of the three doors. I think in that last door, they make a lot of points. Like there's a lot of moments where he points out that like he doesn't want to kill the cops, that they're
Right.
gunslingers. He pays the guy for the bullets, even though he doesn't have
Bullets with a
to.
Rolex.
Yeah, he pays
Or
for
no, that was for
the medicine.
the
Yeah,
Keflex with a Rolex. Yeah.
yeah. That's a hilarious scene because the guy
Right.
that owns the drugstore is like, I don't think no drugstore ever has been held up for
Right.
antibiotics
And paid with
with a Rolex. Yeah.
a Rolex. Now go
um,
put then the guy's like, and go put the Rolex away.
yeah, go put it under the counter. That never happened. He's
That
like, oh
never
yeah,
happened.
as long as I get my cut, I never saw it. But yeah, like they give a lot of examples of him kind of being like chaotic good or
Oh yeah.
whatever the alignment is. But I didn't get that in the first book, and I don't think they allude to it much at the beginning of this book.
Well, so far you don't know a lot of what a gunslinger is. Or you just know
Yeah,
that he's a gunslinger, but you don't really know what that necessarily means. And um, one of the things I
I have a
mentioned.
I have a theory why this is, by the way. Like I
Okay.
think so my theory is as because of the ka and the I forget what you called it last time, but where they're like one thing now. They're the
Octet.
quartet, yeah. Because of the quartet, I think that whenever Roland is introduced to Eddie and Eddie becomes like he goes through the door and he's like part of the quartet, I think that I think that changed both their alignments in some way. And then
All right.
likewise with Odetta, I think that Roland is a different character after the third door than he was before the first one.
Oh yeah.
I
I
think
would
that
agree.
all of that is adapted, and I think it's because that's why I asked you at the beginning of this podcast, who was it that wanted to bring Balazar back the cocaine? Because if it was Roland, then that would allude to like, well, I mean, I don't know. It's questionable whether you say somebody's chaotic good for giving somebody the cocaine they owe them, but
Right.
but like he could see it as justified. Like, hey, we said we were going to give this guy this thing.
I
We're,
could definitely see
our
Roland
word is
doing that.
bond. Yeah, like we're
Our
gonna
word
go
is
through with it.
bond. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. That was something that stood out to me. I guess I'll learn more about it as the quartet goes on. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. I mean, and
I want to
you,
believe that Roland is changing over the course of being introduced to these characters
well,
because
you get like
I didn't like Roland in the Gunslinger. Like I didn't
right.
I didn't like him. That was one of the things that we talked about when we reviewed that one. Is like to me, I wasn't that interested in Roland. I'm way more interested in him in this book after having met Eddie,
Right.
than I ever would have been in that first book.
So, kind of, well, I mean, going along with that, you'll get like, so Roland has been doing this. You get the references where they say that Roland was like talking in his sleep and he was talking about
Yeah,
Alan and Cuthbert and
yeah,
talking about Susanna. So you learn. you will learn about more of these people, and you'll learn about what it means to be a gunslinger and who they were and what they did. And like, so you get this period with Roland where all these people, and he was involved in like a life, and then all the circumstances of the world, and then he's pursuing the tower for however long, ridiculous, by himself. Like he's just,
Yeah.
and now he's back, and
He's building a group of
like
people
he's
again.
building a quartet again.
Yeah.
And so like with each one, he is definitely, he's like, he's got to learn that, like, because even Eddie makes it a point all throughout the book that, like, I know you would walk over,
Mm-hmm.
all of me, like you would, no one's getting in your way to the Dark Tower and your journey, your obsession to it. And then like you start to wonder, especially now, if he would do that, if it starts to become a question, and it becomes a bigger question as the books go along. But you know, it's definitely a theme of is Roland the Roland of old, or is he going to become a softie? And there's a lot of philosophical stuff with this quartet stuff that's coming up. Like,
Yeah.
so you'll get way more into that. Um,
I
but
thought
as far as like,
I thought
go
I
ahead.
was in the last part of the book. I thought I was clever. If I had just quit reading at the moment that I had this thought, and then we did the podcast, I would have sounded smart. But then, like literally, the very next sentence I read was Eddie saying exactly what my thought was. But the tower is to Roland what the heroin was to Henry, and
Oh yeah, yeah,
that's why Eddie keeps bringing that up, is because he sees that, like.
yeah.
And the thing that really struck me about it was, and this is what kind of made me get where the gunslinger is, and what the tower means to him, is that like Eddie knows, and I don't have any family members that have any issues with heroin, but I've seen other things like where Eddie knows that like Henry loved him probably more than anybody in the world, but yet that was not enough to
Right.
overcome his addiction to heroin. Like he still wanted heroin more than Henry, or that than Eddie.
Then Eddie, yes,
And that
and he
kind
was
of
willing to use Eddie
exactly.
regard any way he
Yeah.
wanted to get what he needed.
Yeah. I had an experience one time where somebody like I thought was a friend of mine just completely screwed me over in like a really specific way. And then Matt actually told me, he's like, "Hey," I was like, "I really thought that guy was I really thought that guy was my friend." Like, and Matt was like, "Yeah, he was. This is what he does to his friends. You know what I mean? Like, this is
Right.
who
Yeah.
this guy is." And I think this is like an illustration of that. It's like Roland is so set on the tower, and that like even these people probably are the most important people in Roland's life right now. That's still not enough. Like he would still kill them if it meant getting to the tower. You know?
So you kind of get that. Well, at the end of this, you get Roland gets the bullets. He gets,
Yeah.
he's amazed that you can get 100,
Yeah.
500
200
bullets in
bullets.
a
Yeah. 50
box, and he's
bullets
got
in a
100.
box. Yeah.
And so like he gets these, and he moves on. He gets again. He's amazed because he's still in the Keflex, and the guy's like, "Well, there's 250 doses in there." He's like, "Holy crap!" Like, so he steals that, and then he makes the cops make him out. He's going to a location, and he gets Mort to steal a car, and they drive. You don't know exactly what's happening, and then all this stuff happens with like some actual good cops show up. Roland makes the remark, "Hey, these are
Yeah.
these are the real gunslingers," and
Right.
but it's the whole rider convenience too thing
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
lighter and stuff. So
Yeah.
like um anyway, you get to the thing where like you start getting Roland's idea. So he's going to the subway, and he throws Jack Mort down in front of the train. He's waiting, and now he's finally turning to look behind him at the door, and he's calling to Dedo No Detta to look in the door.
Yeah.
And basically, so the idea earlier when he knew that they saw each other coming through the door, he knows if they look, they're going to see each other, they're going to see him, and they're also going to see the person who caused all of their grief and
Mm-hmm.
Jack Mort get taken out.
Mm-hmm.
And then, his plan is to, I guess he's hoping that it'll cause some kind of psychotic break. And, I don't know exactly what he's thinking, but breaks the whatever he's in. And of course, he does. They look in. He jumps at the last second, and Mort gets cut in half. And Odetta and Detta see each other, and they, I guess, have a. I don't know. I mean, like
They're like two people for a moment.
they're like for a moment, and they at first they yeah, I mean they fight with each other, but then they kind of come to an agreement,
Yeah.
and then as they do which the whole book you're thinking the three people from three, basically three realities he drew to one person to become this new person called so now Odetta. So it's basically you
Discord
so
is
per
your Discord's
mm,
like your Discord was breaking up really bad.
okay. Uh, I
I'm
was saying,
sorry. I was trying to let you go because I didn't want to mess you up where you're on a roll, but it was it was pretty bad. I don't even know where you were.
well, I'll go back. So, I guess we were talking about where
So Detta and
Odetta and
Odetta
Detta
were
saw each other,
yeah, and they were like two people for a moment.
two people for a moment, and then
Yeah.
it's just basically they had to come to grips with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then instead of fighting, they come to an understanding, and then they make Susanna essentially, which is the drawing of the three separate personalities that come out that form Susanna.
Yeah.
Um, and that the true drawing of the three, which kind of throws you off because there's the three doors and you think three people,
Right.
um,
Which would have made four, you know?
which would have made four. So,
So it
but
all
there is more to that too, though. But anyway, so
yeah.
after Susanna comes through, that's when you see like you get Roland getting better. You get the like, of course, the media after effect is like when she finally comes to be Susanna, she realizes Eddie's about to die, and she turns into Gunslinger
Yeah.
immediately and takes out the Lobstrosities with the gun, like she's been doing it her whole life.
Yeah. The thing I liked
Um,
about that scene was like you heard Detta's voice basically saying like
yes,
you better get away from those mofos and like she shoots them and kills them and you're like oh shit it's Detta but she's like on the
right.
right side now but that's not quite what it is it's like you said it's the drawing of the three but
It's a merging because Detta and
they needed
Odetta are
they needed
still
something
there,
from both of them yeah
right?
right yeah
So Susanna uses each one of them to get what she needs, kind of thing. So
right
yeah, like it's that's pretty good. But then like after that, you get the whole picture of like they're hunting. They're like Susanna is kind of fallen into this groove of this world almost already,
mm-hmm
and same with Eddie. They're like it's like natural.
mm-hmm
That's kind of that whole end piece that I get is like this is like they're home now kind of thing.
yeah
And I think Roland is picking up on that too, like, and that's where like the quartet you see starting to form because they're coming together as like quartet is many from one from many
yeah
kind of thing. And
I really liked that last chapter the final shuffle.
yes,
And that's interesting. The thing that stuck out to me was from Roland's perspective. It was like he was finally like calm and at peace
yes,
in those moments. Like, as a matter of fact, there's even the part where he shoots the deer and he thinks for a moment he missed. And I kind of read that as he's like, I finally lost it. It almost felt like he was kind of hoping that he had. You know what I mean?
right,
But then, of course, when it turns out he didn't, he's relieved that he didn't. But I think in my mind, there was a moment where he was like, "I can just be happy now, and I no
right.
longer need to pursue the tower." He just seemed content. You know,
Yes.
it reminded me of what's the Star Trek where it ends with Shatner cutting wood because he goes into
Right.
the
Right.
ribbon or whatever. It reminded me of that kind of scene where it's like this is almost like this like afterlife fever dream for Roland, and
Yes.
he's happy in this moment. And then they have the conversation that we talked about earlier, but they have this passionate conversation between Eddie and Roland that kind of sums up you know, a lot of the relationship that we just got throughout the whole book. I thought it was a great final chapter. Like I thought
Yes.
it felt like the ending of like uh, Return of the King or something. Like it felt like the ending of a
Right.
fantasy novel where you're just wrapping up after this long journey and there's like this moment of contentment and peace. It's like right at the end.
Right.
It was a really good ending to the book. And then that whole confrontation that we just discussed with the lobstrosities and stuff. Again, if you were making this a TV show, that would be the season
Be
finale. It
fantastic.
would all
Right.
culminate to that, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Eddie hog-tied, getting ready to get eaten, and
I
then all of a sudden Susanna come up.
yeah, that was a
Yeah, that did.
perfect moment. I got to say, like, I mean, this like I was uneasy about the Gunslinger. If I had read the Gunslinger without your guidance, I wouldn't have read this book. And
Right.
if I had read this book, I would 100% been I want to read the next book now. You know, like I'm excited for the
Oh yeah.
series after reading this one. Um and it's I'm not that into westerns. You know what I mean? Like I know
Right.
that it gets more into that later on, but now I have a foundation of like what the world is and stuff from this book. Um
Right.
and this was
Well,
just such a sweet.
one of the cool things about that is like even in there's one book, Wizard and Glass is I wouldn't say heavy Western, but it's you got to understand the world is like moved on to where it's like
Yeah.
an old West society kind of thing. But even now at this point, it's even moved on to where that's disappearing. But what's cool is like you'll have like this old Western stuff, but things that used to be technology
Yeah.
1,000 years ago are still around, and they kind of weave their way into like into their society, like like a place that has an electrical light bulb that still works. It's like this amazing thing, or like
Yeah.
a place that like some crazy like robber baron type dude has an ice maker that still works. Kind of like it's stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
um, so you get the western, and then you get the technology, and then you just throw in all the time
The
travel
yeah.
and
The
all that
time
stuff. It's just crazy.
the time travel and the interdimensional stuff. That's what I'm on board for. I'm wanting to read more of that.
So yeah. So like when you sum up all this, you get this. This is definitely the character building book. So
Mm-hmm.
you get more into that. Now, when we move to Wastelands, that moves into more of the world building. You get a lot of what Midworld is, and the different areas of Roland's world. Um, I'm still interested to see what you think about Jake, and what if you think there's anything that is going to happen with that. That's that's like I said, you'll like the way he handles paradoxes and time stuff, and
Yeah.
um,
I it's hard for me to make a prediction because I don't know how
you'll never.
it works in this, but if just my gut reaction is so if he did save him, if that was the same Jake that would have died and would have went to Roland's world or his universe or whatever, then he's still going to die one day. He'll just be older by some other cause, and he could still end up there, but he won't have any memories of Roland. Um,
It's gonna blow your mind. I can't wait.
but that's just my
it's
gut.
it's
That's my
it's
gut
so good.
reaction.
You're gonna be quite surprised. Oh yeah, I forgot about this. Let's see. I don't know if you can see this. I
Yeah, I
got
see. I saw it was a. I saw it
the
was some
Dark
sort of gun.
Tower.
Yeah.
It says my first thought was he lied with every word, and it says child rolling to the Dark Tower come. It's got him on there. So
um. So yeah, I don't know. I really loved it. compared to the
So
other book,
yeah, I
and
mean,
I'm
like,
excited for the. I think I don't see how this. So here's another thought I had today was, I don't see how this isn't everybody's favorite. Like, is this everybody's favorite? Can
nah.
it can it top
I mean, there's
can it
people that
top
I would
this?
say, oh yeah, like my favorite. God, I don't know. Wizard, Wolves of the Kala might be my favorite, like a favorite, but like the last two books just go off the rails, and it's
Hmm.
like, I mean, it's I can't really talk about it all but I mean, it's like the concept that he comes up with, is fantastic. To me, some people are like not like hamstring it, but like they're like, oh come on, well, I can't believe you do that. But like I thought it was brilliant. So
Hmm.
like I think you will like it a lot. And again, this is all so much like foreshadowing, so much like just trails left everywhere, like just crap just keeps showing up, like um, and
Well,
I think I'm really excited for you to learn because I think we talked about this previously in the other episode that we didn't do, but like the story of what the gunslingers are and who Roland is descended from and what the meaning of his guns and stuff. That's all
yeah,
like a big like
yeah.
meaning behind it. And when you find out, you're gonna be like, dude, that's cool as hell because like where especially like who his family is and like especially what his gun symbolize, like
Hmm.
it's really cool.
Well, I
It's
can't.
something you won't see coming.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I can't wait to get further into it. So, what book are we doing next?
So do we decide we're gonna do that short story or are we gonna
I think we should
it's
knock.
up to you. I'm good with anything.
I started a new book today, but I'm already getting kind of bored with it. Um, I think we should do the Edge Dancer novella that goes between. He goes between Words
Oathbringer
of
and
Radiance and Oathbringer, yeah, and it's the story about the girl that makes herself slick.
Lift or whatever.
Lift, yeah, Lift. It's the story about Lift. And I picked up the book. It's such a short book. I'm not going to buy the audiobook. I'm just going to read the physical book. But I bought the book because we were at Books A Million the other day, and I just saw it on the shelf and thought I'd go ahead and pick it up. And it's a it's like a 200-page book, and it's a really small book, so there's not many
Right.
words on the 200 pages. So we'll get through it really fast. I'm sure we can do it in one episode, do the whole book. And if you read that interlude, that's the first part of the book, so you got a head start.
Right.
So yeah, maybe we should do that one next, and then I think after that, man, we want to get into. We could talk about it after we do Edge Dancer, but do we want to get into Oathbringer? Like,
I'll
whoo,
leave that one to you. Like I can go Oathbringer or I can do Wastelands or we could do something completely different.
yeah,
Because I've read, I mean, Oathbringer I'm very interested in,
yeah, oh
but
yeah, me too. I
I'm
don't.
very see like I get so excited about Dark Tower that it
Yeah,
when
yeah, yeah,
other people get excited about it, I'm like, come on, I
yeah.
gotta see the reaction to
I
this.
know
So
what you mean. Yeah,
like with me knowing what's coming up, I'm just like I'm ready
yeah.
to see your reaction too. So if you want to do whichever, I'm down for
After
anything.
immediately after Edge Dancer, we may not want to jump right back into that world, but I don't know that we'd want to do something as long as the
How many
Wastelands either.
how many pages was Wasteland? I didn't even look.
It's significantly thicker than this one. I don't know how many pages it is. But I'm gonna go ahead and end the show. We can talk about this after. But thanks for listening. We will see you next episode with Edge Dancer, and thanks for watching. Peace.
Yeah. Peace out.